It is 1 p.m. on April 11th. We're in our second for the day work session. We'll see how long this goes. I think we covered a lot of ground this morning and appreciate the conversation. Before I get started, I do want to share from Mr. Fowler, from Mike yesterday. He shared with us what was in the budget as far as the bond bills. And he said $225,000 for playgrounds, $1 million for the sheriff's office, $500,000 for Hampstead Fire, $75,000 for playgrounds, Carrolltown Playgrounds, and then another fund, I didn't get the number, for Westminster Playgrounds. The initial $225,000 was for playgrounds in the county for, I believe, the Board of Education to take on. $75,000 for Nate's Place Playground. I believe Nate's Place is over in Freedom. Nate Baker Foundation. I think that's where it is. And the Nathan Baker Foundation is pretty phenomenal work they do. And then $50,000 for the ARC is what Mr. Fowler gave me. He'll come in on Thursday in open session to share probably this again, and also comments from Sindai, which occurred at midnight last night, and all the decisions that had been made. I just felt like, important to share some of the capital projects and how we came across. There's also, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but money that's been allocated for broadband across the state. And we received a significant amount, I think close to around $9 million of broadband funds to Ting, I believe. And the amount of homes I don't have in front of me, but it was significant. So continue to press forward with some of these capital projects. Where we left off, I asked the team to share with some of the Carroll County tax changes that had occurred. I appreciate the work that's done, and it talks about real property, personal property tax, income tax, and recordation. And, if you start with recordation on the bottom, which we all have, 1968, when it was created, it was $3.30 per 500. And then 95, it went up, no. Oh yes, it went up from 330 to 350. And then in FY03, it went up from 350 to $5. And then the rest is up there. Hadn't been a lot of changes that I noticed. Significant ones were 13, 14, 15 timeframe dealing with property tax and income tax. But the last time there was an increase in real property was 97. The last time there was personal property was in 06. And the last time there was an increase in income tax was in 96. No, in 04. I apologize, in 04. So, okay, with all this said, where do we want to go next? Ted, did you have any opening comments you want to make? I apologize.
We've talked a little bit about the need for election space, and I told you that that's kind of actively being worked on. We actually have taken some more steps. There's still a lot that we don't know. We're nowhere near being able to fully define this. But we do have a lease possibility. We've done some work to try and say what it cost us to build a building and how those two compare. So even without us having entered negotiations on a lease, we believe that over a 20-year period, we would be better off with the lease than building. And there are a few other things in the mix if we were to build. We don't have a space, so we would need to find land somewhere, buy land. We don't know about a water allocation. And as was pointed out in one of your discussions, that does put you on a different timeline, building than leasing. Of course, this is not free, and we think, and again, this is all before we've negotiated a lease, but just kind of as a starting point, we probably need to be building in about $500,000 a year for the lease, and we're going to need about $5 million for build out. If we fund that with cash, then the $500,000 a year is in the ballpark. If we're going to bond that, then we're looking more like $1 million a year. And I believe we need to add it to this picture. It wasn't in here already because we just had almost no information. But now that we have some idea, we know this is coming. What choice we make, these numbers would still be in the ballpark one way or the other, at least closer than starting at zero.
So we would get no money from the state for the renovations that would have to take place? I mean, because the 5 million, that's what the $5 million figure would be, right? We wouldn't get anything from it?
Tenant improvements,
Improvements, yeah, all these, I mean, because it's all the security.
We believe there would be state participation in the building. Still some things we need to check out there, but we've included that in these calculations. If they'd be in on the tenant improvements, we don't have any information that they would. But of course, that's something we would continue to make sure we understood. Like I said, there are still a lot of unanswered questions at this point. This is really, my bringing it up now is just to say, I think it's time for us to build it into the plan. It's not a good number, but it's going to be a lot closer than us ignoring it.
Just a quick question. So besides, obviously, the funding we're looking at here, there's also, am I correct, there's also potential grants that could be utilized towards Board of Elections and a variety of things?
Seems unlikely.
I know I've heard of a few in the past. That's the only reason I'm asking. I know there's been things that have been done in previous years, so I wasn't certain. Maybe not here, but other places.
I'm not aware of any grants, but again, we will always look.
Sure.
Commissioner Gordon brought up the blueprint and the impact that could have if we took a average number of the numbers that we've been looking at, and the impact that would have. Well, it's not going to happen in FY24, but FY25 and forward it will. So, you know, that it's kind of like when you talk about income tax, the miracle, the glass bowl, what you're looking at, whatever you call it. If we were to put a number in there, what do we think collectively would be a number? To even
To try to game it out?
to forecast it out, yeah. I mean, the two numbers I keep hearing are 32 and 50 million.
And you said
And
50?
as we look at this, there's the question of what will the cost of implementation be? But then there's also the question of how much are we willing
Right.
to take on, at least until the point the state tells us what we're going to
Right.
take on. Right now, we have no state requirement to fund anything more. My guess is if we're not doing it, that's going to change. But we don't know.
So halfway between 32 and 50 is what, 41?
So your crystal ball is saying 41 million.
Yeah. 'Cause I'm looking at both numbers between the low end and the high end. I figure if we go somewhere in the middle to see how it unfolds over time, 41 might not be a bad place to start.
Put it in?
I mean, how much, I don't know how much time we want to spend on this, because it's probably something we should start discussing on July 2nd, perhaps. I mean, we can put a number out there, but we can't even fund it. We don't know.
I think it was just for the sake of curiosity, right? I mean, just having a general sense of the future. That's a lot of zeros.
I mean, I could have,
That it doesn't change our maintenance of effort.
I don't think so. It's basic school costs. I don't see any way you make it, a non-recurring cost or something.
Because, hopefully, somebody in Annapolis wakes up over the next few years and isn't the ongoing burden.
Your mic's, Commissioner, yeah.
Is that on?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but, and again, I don't want to trash Annapolis, but the likelihood of them, I won't say waking up, but going in a different path is going to be unlikely because of, the jurisdictions that are out there. And this is not focused on Carroll County. And we're going to be held accountable for something that is unfortunate, but that's the situation, because I agree with you. And there is the thought of waiting to the next fiscal year, like you said, July 1st or 2nd, starting that conversation as well.
Well, I think also to Commissioner Guerin's point, and I know we've been a lot more, we've been trying to be proactive in areas where we could raise our voices about certain things. And I think it's important because if you look at these numbers for the next couple of years, FY25, we're at 43 million, 26 we're at 42.5, 27 we're at 48.2, 28 we're at 54, might as well be 55. And then FY29, we're $60,500,000. I mean, that is staggering.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's assuming that middle road between the
Right.
32 and the 50.
Right.
And then Ted, you were thinking that we should be adding 500,000 a year?
If we're willing to devote one-time money to the build-out, if we want to bond that, then we're looking at about $1 million a year.
And does that reflect on what we were talking about first thing this morning about trying to prevent debt from accruing by paying for things with cash?
Yeah, another version of the same kind of thinking.
Okay.
Well, those numbers are really ugly.
Yeah.
So do we want to take those numbers off for now?
I think
So it's
so.
not as ugly?
My only question is there any way possible we can physically fund that?
So,
No. I mean,
It's,
unless we do something so dramatic in taxes that doesn't make any sense.
yeah.
So, no, I mean, I don't believe so.
and you still couldn't get away from the fact that you are funding a state mandated program that is not doing our county school system any good.
Right.
So you're never, ever going to get away from that.
Probably hurting
Right.
us.
Absolutely. It's in my view, it is.
Yep.
So,
That's the biggest problem.
but it's, again, it's, I guess time will tell. I'm of the mind of Commissioner Kyler that somebody someplace in Annapolis, wishful thinking, realizes this is not really going to work for the whole state, but I don't know. I had a question going back to this issue of taxes. The recordation fees, do we know where we fall in the state? Generally speaking, my understanding was that our Carroll counties were fairly high.
I believe we are the highest. We're not alone there. But I think we're at the top.
Okay, and there was and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Deb, there was you had a Microsoft Word doc up a little earlier about the history of some of the, I wouldn't mind getting a copy of that if,
Oh, it's also reflected in what we gave to you.
okay, so that was essentially just,
Yeah,
all this
yeah, I
is
took-
watered down, okay, okay. Then that's fine then, appreciate it. Just historical purposes, it's always good to know.
But I can send you the narrative.
Thanks, it's always good to have the history.
Do other jurisdictions have a transfer tax?
Almost all of them.
And how does our recordation compare to the combination? Still high?
Oh, well, if you want to combine them, we'd be much, much lower.
Say again?
If you combine them, we're much lower. Because the transfer tax and recordation in most counties are roughly the same thing. So if we had a transfer tax, right now our recordation is the equivalent to 1%.
Yeah.
It'd be more like 2%. Yeah, so I never really thought about it that way, but yeah, if you look at it, they're very, very similar taxes.
Yeah.
We look really good by that standard.
And the 5 to 6 is 1% to 1.2%.
Yes.
So on a $400,000 home, $800. And that's a one-time tax.
And we've also had conversations about excise taxes. Is there any room for that commercial?
Well, again, we would need General Assembly approval to give us the authority to do that. Excise taxes are much more flexible in their use than impact fees are.
Right. Can we, and I'm not the expert, obviously, in excise taxes, but if we can look at the impact that excise tax could have, moving, again, it's not going to be till next fiscal year, but,
Well, even if you're successful, probably be the year after that even, because we wouldn't get
okay,
General Assembly approval
Yeah.
until next year.
until next year. Okay, but I mean, it's still a tool that we shouldn't, I don't believe, neglect, that we should kind of, where Commissioner Guerin was going, what are the activities or actions we want to take on as soon as this is over with, the General Assembly, and excise tax should be one of them, and understand the impact that could have. I think can be important, especially with some of these areas of growth that we're looking at in the county. They'll either, I won't say, slow things down or make them more measured, and we get more funding from them, so. Was there anything else from my colleagues on those wish lists that we received on issues that we want to cover? I know there were some one-time funds and stuff like that, but any, especially the ongoing.
Well, I'll just bring these up, but before we get to that, I mean, Ted, you had mentioned, was it 500,000 cash versus the 5 million for the build-out for that other building, or what was the breakdown? It was both?
Okay, well, there's two pieces.
Okay.
The paying the lease, which we're figuring about 500,000 a year. Then there's the build-out, and we're saying
5.
it would either be 5 million or so of cash or 500,000 a year for
Okay.
debt service.
Gotcha. Hypothetically, do we want to just throw that in the mix for right now, just to see where things look like as we keep moving through all this?
Yep. I believe we should. We know we're going to have to do something,
Okay,
and now we have some way to quantify it.
fair enough. Once we've got that in there, do you want to take a look at CC Visa and LoSAP? Just have a conversation on those, since we're going down this list.
My vote is no. I think it's setting a bad precedence, and
For which, all four, or,
Mm.
for which, all four, or are you looking just at CC Visa? I mean, I don't know if you want to take them one by one, or you want to do them, how you want to do that?
Well, CC Visa, the ongoing 80,000 was for what?
I think the 80,000 was for the budget shortfall, if I remember correctly.
That's how they characterized it. And again, this was a matter of internal allocation choices,
Okay.
internal to Visa.
Gotcha.
And we're in a position to provide Visa with a number. How they allocate it and execute it is incumbent on them, correct?
Yes.
And now they want above and beyond with 80,000. I mean,
And what do we give them currently? What's the,
The number is changing now because we're moving from their budget to our budget. I'm not even really sure what we're giving them now. Visa.
Used to be about $14 million, but now as we transition, I think it's slightly less than that.
Yeah, I don't have the book in front of me right now, but they're, of what they are keeping, they got 3% increase, and they also got an additional 64,000 in their base budget this year outside of the 3% for vehicle and building maintenance, because they were able to demonstrate that the costs there were going up. So they actually got a little bit more than 3% in their base.
Thank
so it sounds to me that we should not provide Visa with the additional 80,000, correct?
I would agree, I'd be in agreement with you there.
In answer to the question, how much are we funding them now? As things stand, for what they still have of EMS, about 2.7 million, and then Visa, about 5 million.
Okay. So on these issues, taking Visa requirement or request, off the table. The LoSAP, reducing the age 60 to 55. Isn't this just a study that wants to be done, or no?
They want the change. We would have to do a study to understand what it's going to cost. There were a couple other things in the mix here. First, just a reminder, this is a standalone fund. We pay the benefits out of a dedicated pot of money. We were some years trying to get that into a solid position, which I think our next actuarial study, putting aside any changes, is
Right.
going to show we're in a good position now. Now, of course, if you add benefits, costs go up, and that changes that position. Now, Visa was making the argument, and this was interesting, because I've never heard this from them before, that we are making the calculations based on too great a number of volunteers, that there aren't that many active volunteers. That worries me some, because we've been funding physicals for volunteers for years, presumably on that same number. But that's another story. But they're saying, once we've accounted for how many there actually are because we've been funding for too many, that maybe the benefits can happen without an increase in funding. I don't know that. I'm just saying that's the argument that they made.
And so, Commissioner Rosin, you're saying they were looking for a study to determine this, or they're
Well,
actually
we-
looking for the money to fund it?
We would be doing the study.
You know, they want the money, they want the benefits.
Right.
I'm just saying, we can't quantify this without having a study done. I have no way to tell you what it would be.
The study or the benefits, or both?
The benefits.
What the cost of the benefits would be.
The impact on the plan, if we, there's an actuarially defined contribution that we
Right.
are supposed to make each year, and to remain fully funded or close thereto. And if we, without knowing what that contribution, without having the study, we wouldn't know what that contribution would be.
So the intent
Either-
here, yeah, I apologize.
So the board could go ahead and enrich the benefits, and then when the study was done, we would just find out how badly out of our compliance, so to speak, we would be.
Or
And
can
how
we
much more
do
we have to
can we
fund.
do the study prior to anything? I mean, yeah.
Sure, but then that wouldn't be completed in time for this budget year, so we could set it up for '25.
Well, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I think if we're going to potentially look at funding, I'd rather do the study and then fund it versus fund it and then do the study. I think that's kind of backwards. If we want to fund the study itself, I leave that as an if.
And you have any concept at all about the cost of the study? Or that's just totally up in the air right now?
$2,500.
$2,500.
That's the easy part.
Yeah, so why not do the study and then in FY '25?
That's fine, as long as there's interest, although this is another one of those places where I'd say, if the board isn't interested in increasing the benefits, then there's no point in doing the study. So if at least 3 of you say, yes, we would be interested in doing that, then we get the study done.
But you're saying we shouldn't do a study unless we're willing to put the increases in.
Or at least that
place.
it's still a consideration in your mind. Of course, the study's going to tell you, is going to give you more to operate on. If this is going to cost $50,000, and I don't think that's the answer, that might lead you to a different answer than if it's going to cost $500,000 a year.
I would support that study sometime in FY '24, considering everything that's going on with the fire departments and everything that's going on with the volunteer forces. It may not be a bad idea. And let's remind ourselves, these individuals they're already working for free. So if we have a little better understanding, I think some of the onus, though, is going to have to fall on CCVSA to help us with these actual numbers, though. I mean, we need an accurate count of who's active. Some people leave and come back. Some people never come back. I mean, we just don't know for certain. So that's got to be an aspect of this study, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I don't know this, but I don't believe Visa has numbers. I think each company
Each
knows
corporation.
how many volunteers they have.
Right, and they tell Visa. One thing that will help as we transition, the volunteers, in order to stay, will be needing background checks, and Wheels will be conducting, not that we'll be conducting them, but, have the contractor who will be conducting them. So we should have better numbers of who's a volunteer and who's not, who
Okay.
should be counted and who shouldn't.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, at the moment, we rely on other people's information, and that's,
That's data.
yeah, but we don't need a data analyst.
Okay, all right. Oh, okay, I was almost there. So, okay.
Yeah, so that'll be the first time we have really direct information. And I guess in theory, somebody who's not active could still end up getting a background check, but even from their own point of view, they probably don't want to go through a background check if they're not putting in the time. So that should get us a pretty good number.
Okay, so are we in agreement on putting a study in place?
Yes. Yep.
I certainly am. I think the timing's good.
I'd support it.
Yep. Sounds good.
Thank you.
So we can get that rolling. And if you're going to do it, I'd say, given the small cost, we might as well just contract for it now, get it as soon as we can.
That's fine.
It might be able to be done before you finish the final budget work sessions in May. I don't know.
Other thoughts?
Just to go, yes.
So what is our current bottom line? Thank you very much.
The, the gloom and doom on revenue, on things that we can touch, property, income, and recordation. Without saying what we want to do in any of these, are there ones that are, in your minds, completely off the table, saying this is not what you want to either have a conversation about or pursue or X? There's three that we have the ability, there's others that we have the ability to go to the General Assembly, like excise, which I think, is a potential, but that's longer term. Impact, or even getting it in place. Bless you. But we've got the spreadsheet and the Word document that kind of lay it out. And I don't take lightly, especially what Commissioner Guerin said about SDAT, because people don't care if it's county, state, or federal. It's money out of their pockets. And that's what's reality. So, even though Commissioner Kyler says, well, your house is getting more valuable, you're going to sell it someday, you're going to die, that's a different story. So, what are your thoughts? I'm kind of like throwing this out there.
On the topic of taxes and
And let's look at the bottom line one more time, so. Yeah, go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. So we ended up where we are now. What was it, 2.286? Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's including the sheriff's build out and everything?
no.
No, that's not. I thought we had something in there for build out.
That's Board of Elections.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
okay.
That's not sheriff.
But that's using one-time surplus funds,
Right.
bringing that over in the revenue to pay for it. So it doesn't have an impact on the bottom line at this point.
Yeah, we haven't even talked to sheriff yet, but
Okay, so, all right, I'm a little confused, I will admit, that we went from 1.7 to 2.286.
That's,
What did I,
500,000 for lease.
that's the
Okay,
least
okay.
space, yes.
okay.
Board of Elections.
Good budget analyst question, though. We're always looking at this stuff and say, wait a second, why'd that change?
So I'll push the PFAS discussion a little further, right? Again, I know it's all up in the air, and I know that we really have no genuine idea about how it's going to proceed, but we do know that there is some kind of a range, and I would not be uncomfortable with removing another $500,000 from PFAS, which would get us back to the 1.7. If everybody's interested in seeing that number.
Yeah.
Because that would still give us the $3 million for the PFAS, but then that would take us up to 2 that we're taking out, which would get us back to the 1.7.
in '24, but it
You're
won't
just
affect any of
looking
the
at
other years.
24. Right,
Right.
okay. So show what that looks like. Yeah, and, you know, you understand it, it just affects '24.
Right.
You said to 2 million, right? $2 million
Yes.
reduction?
Thank you.
Okay.
And that takes us back to 1.786.
And I'd also like to go back to that recommended budget and make some additional changes, if my colleagues agree. Look at a 4% increase as opposed to the original 5.5% for staff. That's 4%.
I thought we did that.
I think we went to 4.5.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So another half, right?
Yes, and I know that the Board of, the Board of Education came in with a $6.7 million increase above what the recommended budget included. I would propose that becoming a 5.2 million increase as opposed to 6.7, while we try to make some of these decisions.
Did we take a
Where we
million
need
of
to
that
be.
already?
You took $1 million, what did?
Yes, we did that earlier, yeah.
Yes, $1 million.
So it'd be $1.5 million off.
Yes, correct,
So taking another $500,000?
yes.
Okay.
So that would be down to what? I'm sorry?
I don't know.
5.2.
Take another.
5.2?
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
What was the additional salary for?
That's the increase, that's the salary increases for staff.
That was, right, additional 1/2, we're removing an additional 1/2 from what was in the recommended for salary increases.
Well,
So
we removed one.
right, we went from 5.5 to 4.5, and Commissioner Guerin just suggested dropping it another 0.5% to 4,
Go to 4.
And
Right.
3.5 is COLA.
if we decide it is.
Yeah, that will be determined.
That is not, that's not fixed. You know,
No,
we
no,
can-
okay, I got it. Well, okay, I mean, I don't necessarily agree yet, but I definitely want to see it played through, you know. How,
Well, it is a work session, so,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Yep.
absolutely.
I mean, we
Yeah, it's just,
got to be honest with ourselves and with people watching.
Right.
We don't have the money.
And-
And none of us really want to raise taxes. Certainly, I don't. I don't want to discuss any of these 4 options, so, at least not now.
what is our workforce right now as far as our Delta? Do we know? I mean, are we at 10%?
Oh, just commissioner employees?
Yeah.
Haven't heard lately. I can find out.
I mean, all the work we've done to sustain the workforce, to allow the services to be conducted in the county. My concern is we're going to be taking a step backwards. And, you know, folks may not all see the services that are done from the work crews that are on the roads and stuff, but, or the landfills or other places. But it is significant, and we are probably as thin can be.
Are
And-
you asking about number of vacancies?
Yeah,
I've just,
and this is going to have a ripple effect on that as we continue to age our workplace, our workforce.
right, and keep
So-
in mind, these, the built-in recommended increases are not only for commissioner employees, the 750 souls directly in, but they're also the courts, the state's
Yeah.
attorney, et cetera, so.
So in order for us to maintain the services we got to do something. And like you said, we're still at a delta with revenue. So we either got to look at, or delta with, we still can't pay for even this, what we're trying to accomplish.
What's the bottom line?
I mean, nobody wants to talk about taxes because it's a bad word, but we gotta focus on if we're gonna continue to not even grow our services, but maintain them, sustain them, we gotta do something. And, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we're chipping away at education, and I feel like we're not the experts in education, except for one that has been, there for quite some time on what their needs are, and we're saying, no, you don't need that. We're gonna lower the money you're gonna receive, even though you said you need this. And I believe education, safety, security is the top, and we haven't even touched the sheriff yet. So, in order to do both of those, we need to touch the revenue. And if we're not willing to touch the revenue, I'd be very interested in somebody saying, okay, these are the other things we're not gonna do that don't affect our safety, security, or our education.
I could discuss recordation taxes, but no other ones this year.
If we were to touch recordation, which the last time it was touched was 3.5, I think, to 5 in 20 years ago. 20 years ago.
Yep.
It was discussed to bringing it to 5 to 6. What would that do to our bottom line?
Before 1 million.
It was about 3 million, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. In 20 years, we haven't touched it.
So keep in mind that doesn't just affect people who are moving to Carroll County, that affects people who are moving within Carroll County as well, so.
I fight for affordable housing, so this is backwards for me.
I agree.
And,
But, like I say, a $400,000 house, it's $800 difference. If that makes or breaks you buying a $400,000 house, I'm
yeah,
not sure.
and we don't have impact fees, we did
Yeah, we don't
away
have
with
impact
those
fees, we don't have transfer
years
fees.
back. And I think your staff, a few months back, somebody put together some information on impact versus excise and broke that down.
That was me.
Oh, that was you, okay, so we do have some information on that, just for.
Well, we have impact fees. They're set at 0. But we do,
One, the school impact fee. You do have a
Yeah.
park impact.
I mean,
It's
It's still above 0.
okay, okay.
Just to be clear.
what we don't have, like you said, is excise, which has an opportunity to get us income.
Yeah.
But impact fees we do, they're just set at 0.
Okay.
And the impact fees are very limited use.
Correct.
To be paying for the impact that new development, basically, the additional development creates in the system.
But into the comment earlier, taxes are a bad word because people are used to having more money taken out of their pocket and then watching their governments, whether it's the federal, state, or local governments, spend more, and it's never enough. It's never enough. I mean, that's the issue that we're dealing with. Aside, in addition to that, we are looking at, I feel, and I think a lot of people feel, an economic downturn of sorts. People's taxes are going up. Everyone's getting less returns than they did a year ago. People's inflation's supposed to go up another 7.5% this year in certain areas. Assessments are up. I mean, people are already paying more. So that's why I'm fundamentally opposed to having that discussion right now. So you asked the question, and for me, the answer is no. Now, the recordation issue, I had asked earlier where we are in the state, because we don't want to hurt ourselves having it too high either. But it hasn't been raised for a while, so if that's something to look at, it's probably good we're having the discussion at least. We can always have it again next year.
And I agree, Commissioner Guerin. We say that taxes are a bad word, and it's because they do end up hurting some people. They do end up making a difference. And Commissioner Rothstein, I know you know this. I know, I'm not saying this to be argumentative or anything. I know you do not want to raise taxes either. They really do, like we discussed last week, they do have a real world effect. And I know we're here trying to balance numbers on a screen right now to make our budget work. But again, like I'd mentioned last week, people are using tax refund money to pay for food. And if they're at that level, then increasing income taxes or property taxes is not a smart thing to do when they're having difficulty affording something to eat.
The way I see it is, we have 170,000+ folks in our community. And how can we best serve that 170,000 folks and plus? To include our education, which is second to none. To include establishing a fire EMS, to having, a sheriff and his department that is, again, second to none in everything they do. Numbers have increased. The workforce has not increased. It has actually decreased. The recordation, 2003, well after that, 100 folks from our workforce went away. Well after that, 10 years after that. When that 100 folks went away, the services stayed in place. So taxes went down, workforce went away, services stayed in place. To think that that can actually be sustained over time is really difficult. I mean, it cannot be sustained. So something's got to give. We either stop doing certain services that are expected, or we work towards maintaining, not increasing the services, just maintaining them with the workforce that we have, which is 100 less than it was after these taxes were adjusted. You're right, I don't like talking about taxes. I don't, but I do like talking about what services do our community, what do they deserve as a whole? I mean, yeah, there'll be naysayers on social media, and they'll type whatever they want. There'll be 5 or 10 people saying this or saying that. There'll be the parents with kids in schools praising this, because they'll go to town halls and say, yeah, we are all willing to raise taxes because our kids deserve it. That's that group. Then we'll have another group saying something else. But if we look at this holistically, just over the last 2 decades, there have been this changes in revenue, changes in workforce. The one thing that's never changed is the services that our local government has provided. And I believe the services that our local government has provided is second to none and could actually be better. And it's aging. So that's my rationale to get us to a point where how do we maintain the services?
And Commissioner, I respect the discussion, I do. And I apologize if you felt like I was not.
No.
But so do we have any numbers as far as the recordation tax is concerned, the sales? Do we know what percentage of them are new residents to the county versus existing residents of the county? because of the, some years ago, and I forget exactly when it was, but some years ago, there was some economist who did a study, I think it was called like How Money Walks or something, and you could go to a map of the United States, county by county, and see whether counties had income that was shifting to or away from those particular counties, based on where people were moving based on tax rates. And so I'm wondering if we have more people who are moving into this county from wealthier areas versus people moving from one side of the county to the other. And I'm wondering if Commissioner Kyler's suggestion of the recordation increase is not a way to temporarily deal with the revenue side of things. So that way, for example, if I'm not moving anywhere in the county this year, I'm not paying taxes, I'm not going to have an increase in my income or my property taxes. But if I'm coming from Montgomery County or Frederick County or from somewhere else, it's a wealthier area than we are, I am going to pay an extra $800 or whatever it was to move into the county. And if we have impact fees, which are set at 0, which, and I'll be honest, I'm not quite sure why those are the case, and if you want to enlighten me, I'm perfectly willing to learn. But if we have, a number of other options other than increasing taxes on people that we're not utilizing, why are we not utilizing those?
So anecdotally, and I think it's probably the same for District 5 as well, there are a lot of people trying to move to the southern part of the county from outside of the county. Houses are on the market for maybe a day in the Mount Airy area, and they're getting a dozen or plus offers. So again,
And they go
anecdotally.
From 550 to 1.2 million. I mean,
Yeah, even the houses in my neighborhood are going for about 150 or 200,000 more than anybody thought they would. So
it's
there's
incredible.
definitely something afoot there. But the question then is why? Why do people want to move here? And to address some of the questions earlier, I think they want to move to Carroll County because it is a slightly cheaper place to live. And because there's something about Carroll County that is missing from our surrounding counties. And I don't know if they're necessarily moving here for services, but I do appreciate the argument that you make about how important it is. So that's my 2 cents on the influx, but I think there's definitely, you see it a lot down in the southwestern part of the county, probably the
I
same as
agree.
yours.
I mean, I moved here for the schools. I moved here because the horses, take my horses, the schools. I moved here for all the reasons why I want to live here in Carroll County. Exactly the same. And they've just gotten better. Now there's a twist in this, and unfortunately it's called Annapolis, that we have to deal with or own up to, and we don't have a choice. Go ahead.
Commissioner Vigilotti's questions. We would have to check. I wonder if we would have the authority to create a recordation tax that only applies to certain sales, to say if you're moving here, you pay it, but if you're living here already, you don't. And on the impact fees, the reason we have it set at 0, use of impact fees is very restrictive. It's tied to providing an existing level of service to basically a growing population. For schools, the key there is enrollment. And we went through a decade of declining enrollment and then stagnant for a while. This year, it looks like we're going to have something like 400 kids growth. So, and this is something the commissioners could consider. Do you want to put the impact fee in place again? But even that is not that easy because you have to use it the level of service would be providing capacity for those students. Right now, we have capacity in Carroll County. Now, in the South Carroll, people will argue, I don't have capacity at my school. But impact fees apply to the whole county, and we do have capacity. So maybe the situation will be changing, but for where we have been, collecting those impact fees that would not be able to be used would mean that eventually we would have to give the money back to the people we collected from. And that's an administrative nightmare. There was no point in doing that when we knew pretty clearly that that's where we would end up, that we'd have to give it back to them. If we find ourselves with steadily growing population again and the capacity of the system declines, then maybe that story changes.
What about for public safety? Do we have a public safety impact fee?
We do not. We have two, schools and parks. We have looked at other impact fees. It's been a while since we have, and you can find all kinds of things. You have to remember, again, the impact fee is to provide an existing level of service to a growing population. Even with law enforcement, right now, our population is not growing very quickly. We're growing, but in a very modest way. And the level of service we'd provide, would probably be number of officers per 1,000 citizens or something like that. Right now, I'd say that's not changing very quickly. But again, it's one you can look at, and you have the authority to do it. You can create another impact fee if you choose. It just has to be considered carefully, because you have to be able, to legally defend it, you have to be able to demonstrate the tie between collecting this money and what's going to be done with it.
So, for example, could a new sheriff's complex fall under the auspice of a public safety tax? Or storage facilities for Department of Fire and EMS vehicles? Or are there ways that we could make a public safety impact fee translate into the capital expenditures that we're being faced with?
I'm not going to say no, but remember, part of this is providing an existing level of service. So if you're providing infrastructure that doesn't exist now, it's hard to make that argument.
Even if providing the same level of service necessitates the creation of new facilities in order to provide those services?
And that's why I said I'm not going to say no. It becomes a harder to defend action. And in the end, that's really what this comes down to, is you have to say, if we're taken to court over this, some developer says, I don't believe you have an appropriate methodology for this impact fee, I'm going to court to have them say that. You want to be in a position where you can say, we believe we can lay out the methodology that will stand the test.
And so, I know I'm coming out of left field with this, as they say. Is there a figure or a number that we could apply to a scenario with this? Like $100 impact fee or something? Or is that too cheap? Is that too expensive?
Again, it's not like setting the property tax rate where you could just say, what do we want it to be? You have to be able to demonstrate that the amount you're going to collect is appropriate for the need to be met.
Okay.
So we would need to determine, how are we going to use this money? What do we think that would cost? How many homes are the impact fees going to be applied to? And then see, does it all hang together? But to give you some sense of where we are, for many years, the school impact fee was approximately $6,000. The parks impact fee is approximately $600.
We don't have the authority to create additional impact fees, right? We'd have to go to the General Assembly for that.
I was thinking we do, but I might be wrong.
Just to clarify, the impact fee on new residential construction was $6,000 before they got rid of it?
Yes.
Oh, I did not realize it was that high.
Neither did I.
And it was actually a bit more than 6,000, and there was a different number for different, like a single-family home was different from duplexes, but they were in the ballpark of 6,000.
When did that change?
That we stopped doing it?
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly, but when the school enrollment started declining, so 12 years ago, 13 years ago?
Okay. Yeah.
I think it was the 59th board. I think.
Yeah, it could be. I don't remember.
Because I think last week, and I think the gentleman was saying that enrollment is projected to be slow but steady.
Right.
And so if an impact fee on new construction, I don't know, maybe it's something we need to look at.
Well, it doesn't have, again, the challenge is that down in the southern part of the county, we may be busting at the seams, but in the middle and the northern part of the county, we're not. And that's why we started doing this redistricting drill and having conversations, because we're not going to get funding if there is capacity available across the county. You know, we don't localize it to one part of the county or not.
Yeah, and keep in mind that impact fees aren't going to affect this picture. It gives you another source of funding on the capital side,
Right.
which could reduce debt, but even there, remember, we have dedicated money for school construction. So when we take on school debt, we also transfer money from there, so it never affects your bottom line.
And obviously, a public safety tax would affect things on that side of the budget as well in future years.
Operating.
I'm sorry, I apologize, operating.
Just major, yeah.
Yes, if you made it available for operating purposes, what it would do potentially would be to keep operating costs from going up. You wouldn't be able to use it to offset existing costs, but if you did something new, then maybe you could have a no net change.
So for example, like a public safety complex.
Okay, well, if we go to capital.
Oh, I'm
that
sorry.
sets it aside in another area anyway. So if it replaces debt that we would have taken on, then yes, it will help your bottom line.
So it's
Time
2013
we
then?
collected, yeah, the last time that we collected was FY12 for school impact fees. So 13 was.
Seems like a whole lot happened in 12 and 13, where things were changed.
Well, you know, this, I would argue, it was not a philosophical change. This was a reaction to circumstances, and
Okay.
I don't believe there was any choice.
Yeah,
The declining enrollment.
Yes.
yeah. Okay. The other large topic besides this has been the sheriff's office. And the two requests that he's making, one is a degree stipend and the other is $1,700 for multiple, dealings, pension, payroll, taxes, overtime, night, et cetera, and
Okay,
child.
that note is just saying he asked for a salary increase,
Is that what that
but that
is?
affects other
Oh,
costs. We're
got
just
it.
saying that total covers everything.
Okay.
So he's not asking for federal taxes. I would just-
No, okay, but he's asking for the 1,700 that's gonna affect, but is he also asking for a child support position? He's not. How is this affecting the child support position?
Oh,
on here.
we're talking grant funding, right?
Yes, yes. It requires some general fund on the grant.
So it's a grant-funded position, and this would have an impact there. So it's just another note saying, we calculated that into it.
All of a sudden, I feel like saying, don't mind the person behind the curtain with these notes.
Yeah, well, the big message to take from that is we are capturing all the costs that would be related to making this change.
But what pay increase was he asking for?
You mean percentage-wise?
That's a little harder to answer, only because it affects the different pay scales in different ways. So the civilian pay scale versus the corrections versus law enforcement.
Okay, but if you put all that aside.
Yes.
and I know they won't apply it this way, but if it's just average across everything.
I will look at what exactly that is, but the biggest percentage would be to law enforcement.
Yeah, because he said this was to get them in the 50% ball.
I think it was for detention
Right.
mostly, wasn't
Corrections as well.
I think it's detention too. I think
Yes.
the law enforcement was done a few years ago to get them into the 50th percentile.
Okay, and I mentioned this to you earlier. I want to remind you again, I think you need to think carefully about tying your action to that idea. Because what that's saying is other jurisdictions are going to make choices on how to fund things, and you are going to be driven by the choices that somebody else is making.
Correct.
And we have recordation tax in here for now, and I think I need to say, if that's what we want to do, I want the 500,000 put back into education and the raises back at 4.5%. That's the only way I would agree to that. But I don't know if everybody else feels the same way or not. And,
I don't think you do yet.
and I'm curious what that percentage would be, because a segment of Carroll County employees the last year got very, very good raises. And I don't feel like if people that got a 15 to 20% raise last year, if only getting 5% this year hurts retention, then last year should never happen. Again, with the sheriff, there's been some very substantial raises, and I agree, we don't want to tie it. I don't like that when I hear from the teachers union, well, Howard County pays this. Well, buy a car and go to Howard County. You know, we're not tied to them, and they work a longer day, their standard of living's different, blah, 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 you know, but, so I don't like that either. But that's why I was curious. Now, does his recommended budget before this have pay increases in it?
Yes, there's 4%
4%,
built in to the recommended.
okay.
For the sheriff's office.
Yes.
So, I agree with you. And it does become concerning when everyone comes to us with a comparison with the other jurisdictions. Frederick, Montgomery, Howard, Baltimore County. I'm like, okay, I got that. You know, let's talk about, you know, others like Washington and Charles and Cecil and Hartford and others that are more aligned.
Similar to us.
Yeah, in both culture and values. Not saying ones are different, you know, or wrong and whatever, but,
You know, if we're going to make comparisons, and I think there is value in doing it, and I don't think we should tie our methodology to other jurisdictions, but I think
Right.
there's value in
Yeah.
comparing.
Yeah.
But I would argue that, generally speaking, there's more value in us comparing to Frederick, Baltimore County, and Howard County, just because that's where people are likely to go.
proximity.
Now, with law enforcement and fire, that might be a little bit different in that you have some people, because of schedules, who will drive longer distances. So, you know, I'm not saying it's the same for everything. But, you know, a decision to move or change your job from here to Frederick is different than from here to Montgomery
No,
or here to Washington.
you know, it's also cost of living, people living in Adams County and other parts in southern Pennsylvania. I mean, there's lots of different dynamics to quality of life for folks. And we know that. I agree with you.
Thank you.
I wonder if it'll just be a wash, though, if we do it that way.
You want to see how the numbers work out?
Yeah. I mean, is that okay?
What's the current number, real quick, just out of curiosity?
The bottom line?
Bottom line, yes.
While she's getting there, Heidi did the calculation. What the sheriff is asking for is, there's the 4% already built in. He's looking for another 5% on top of that. That's just an average, though. That doesn't mean he's going to apply it 5% to every position.
And the increase last year for the sheriff was what?
It was a 2-year increase of 34%.
It was a 2-year increase of 34%. Okay.
Wait, Ted, was 34% each year or 34% across both years?
Totaled.
Total? Okay.
Ted, we would have to go to the General Assembly for any additional impact fees. We're stuck with the two we have for the moment.
But we're certain that's not the case for recordation?
Oh, no, you can raise and lower those, the four.
Just wanted to clarify.
Right, right. Just can't add any new ones without, totally new.
Right, where you have authority for a tax, you can set the rates. Of course, now the state does have the cap on income tax. Property tax and recordation have no caps. Although they could act to create a cap if they chose to.
So, Commissioner Kyler was asking about putting back the education dollars?
Oh, yeah, I meant to say that there, no, so we've had different people now put different things in here
Okay.
to say, what would
Okay.
this look like? So we're getting to a complicated place now where
Okay.
you all haven't agreed
Yep.
to anything, but there's various lines of input.
Yep, gotcha, and that's fair. So, line, was it 82?
Hold on, I'm gonna hide these rows so you can see the actions that were taken,
Okay,
or not actions, but.
right, the actions need to be taken.
There you go. This is a revenue, and these are additional,
Okay.
these are reductions in expenses.
So, start with PFAS, everybody good with that?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. The, what's underneath PFAS?
The 0.5% salary
Reduction.
reduction.
From the 4.5
so
to
that-
4.
Okay, so now these three are tied together, according to Commissioner Kyler.
In my mind.
No, and that's fine. Okay, recordation,
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Commissioner Kyler, you're tying the PFAS reduction
I'm
in
saying,
with...
I'll only go along with recordation increase if the salary goes back to 4.5 and Board of Ed goes back to $1 million.
But not you're okay with PFAS? Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with PFAS.
And those two changes are directly undoing changes that Commissioner Guerin
Oh,
suggested.
I understand.
Right, now, I just want to make sure we're all
yeah,
standing
yeah, no, right?
standing
he's-
together on
And he's okay with
how
it.
this is getting
I
complicated.
understand.
I'm not okay
And
with it, but I
assume
understand.
He and I
Okay,
may vote
yeah.
different ways on this.
Okay, so with that said, we can go with all three first. Is that a motion for you to go with the changes that you just mentioned, Commissioner Kyler? In other words, the recordation and putting back the salary and Board of Education to where it was.
As they're listed here, they're negatives, those two. The salary and the Board of Ed are negatives here.
So you want those to be back to where they were
Yes,
and have the recordation
go from 5 to 6.
go from 5 to 6? Okay.
Can we look at the numbers before we vote? I mean, we don't have to vote on them to
It's
see.
right there. Yep, that's fine.
Or, I'm sorry, when putting back the Board of Ed and putting back the salary, can we see what those numbers are before we vote on whether or not that's the way that we want to go?
Sure.
There you go.
And that puts us at 1.3 over. Okay.
No. Yeah, to the black, in the
Yes,
gray. Yes, sorry.
So then 25 are off, 26 are back on, 27 and beyond we're off again.
And the 25, a number like that in the scope of what we're dealing with here, that, I don't see that as a problem. The
Right.
27 and beyond, problem.
Okay, so the change in recordation from 5 to 6, along with taking those to the salary in the Board of Education. Does everybody understand what we're saying, what I'm trying to say, although muddling through it?
Yeah, just my note of caution would be, I mean, the recordation increases, we may, if we want to make any adjustments down on those between now and in the budget, we need to be aware of that. And we also probably need to understand what I think we've been warned previously, is that number may not continue to stay the same. It may go down.
Yep,
I
absolutely
mean, at some
agree.
point, it's got to go down, right? I mean, like somebody alluded to earlier, the market's just so hot right now, it's not going to stay that way forever.
3.3.
Well, Commissioner Guerin, are you comfortable with the recordation tax?
Any restriction
There's a
on it?
difference
For
between
now.
comfort.
Yeah, for now, I mean, again, we may break,
Yep.
Right.
come back in a
Yeah.
couple days and realize may
Not-
not be a good
yeah.
number anymore. For now, yes.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
definitely a difference between comfort, acceptance, and,
Yeah, yeah,
So-
yeah,
I
And
mean-
everything's still just proposed.
correct.
absolutely. Okay. So making those adjustments, are we good with that?
Yes.
Good? Okay. We're good with that.
So going back to something I was saying earlier, we're now in a position where you can balance FY '24. Now, there might be other decisions you still want to make that unbalance it again, but right now, we can
Well-
get there.
So now, having a conversation about the sheriff.
Okay, before you go there, just want to
Okay.
say, so we can get 24 balanced pending other decisions. The question I think you all need to ask yourself, though, is are we willing to live with what fiscal year '29 looks like?
What's 29 look like?
12 million in the red.
That was not a leading question, just saying, I think
No,
you
I
should
got you.
specifically say, yes, we're okay with it, or no, we're not.
Well,
How- We probably, over lunch, got an email from the library. My humble opinion, when we went from 689, 170 to whatever it was, half that, 345, she would still have a 5 1/8% increase. She had sent an email that by cutting this in half, we're keeping her from meeting minimum wage, and we also did not do the other positions.
Yeah. Now, I haven't done the math. Remember, she sent another email saying what the cost of implementing minimum wage was if they just addressed the bottom three scale, and that was $120,000. So when she was making the argument for the increase, it was not based on that 120, but just on what it would take to give an increase that she thought was, I'll say appropriate, she might say necessary.
Yep.
So she has half of what she was looking at for where they were, and then you put another 120,000 on that, and that's the case she's making.
And I guess I'd be curious, would she rather have the other 120 or the positions? Because I don't see both.
and it was my understanding she wanted the positions more than the,
I know you said that, but I really struggle to believe that that's the case.
Yeah.
well, I had a conversation with her, and she said about positions. I mean, it was clear.
I wonder if she'd still say that if it's an either or.
And I don't know, maybe get
Yeah.
her, having that conversation. And that's fine, we can do that. Because right where we're at right there, I'm struggling with the Board of Ed and Ag Preservation, And I know we're doing it because we have to do it.
And I know it's not sustainable, and I know it's not a long-term solution, but
I
we
just
could
don't
always
like it.
we could plug in $1 million from the surplus to Ag Pres. Again, I know it's not everybody's favorite idea, and I know that it's not a sustainable thing, but
You know, if you want to put it in explicitly as one-time money, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Yeah, the problem is just if you put it in to fill an ongoing purpose that you can't
Right.
fill.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think essentially what you want to do is use surplus to replace the ongoing money we took out.
for this year.
Yeah, for this year only.
I like that.
Which is, yeah, I'm good with that.
Now, where does that put us as a starting point for next year, though? What's for that number? We at the same number we're at currently, I assume?
It'd be down.
Yes.
And now that I
1.5.
better
I thought we
understand
only
it,
took the 1 million out from this year for
Huh?
that. I apologize. Didn't we only take the 1 million out for this year for Ag
No.
Pres?
We took it
For
ongoing.
perpetuity?
That
Yeah,
was ongoing unless you modify that.
this year.
no,
I thought it was just this year, too. I'm mistaken then.
I don't believe so. According to what was up there, it was ongoing,
It's ongoing.
right? Yeah. It's ongoing. That's what
Yeah,
I,
we took out ongoing, but I think what you're saying is you'd like to use surplus for this year only to put them back at the amount they would have
Right.
had, but next year we need to discuss it again.
but you also had the expectation that it was not ongoing.
That is also true. But if we can, manage a stopgap this year with 1 million and then have the discussion next year about putting Ag Pres back to the 2.5 from property taxes, I'm okay with having the discussion next year.
It's better than what it is now. I mean, which
And I would,
I agree with. I just,
I would much rather have Ag Pres continue with that 2.5, but I'm willing to have the discussion again next year. I mean, I don't think there's going to be any year where we're going to have an easy discussion about the budget.
So just to make
Picture
sure.
we have, unless there's a miraculous change in revenue or suddenly some costs go away, right, we're not going to have any different any different basis for conversation next year than we are
Yeah.
this year.
well, except if the blueprint becomes,
We won't have the basis for any better conversation.
oh, better.
Yeah, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's correct.
It's
Yes.
only going to get harder.
It's going to get, yeah, I think it's going to just get that much
The
harder.
economy as well, I just don't think they're going to be hit with the
Yeah.
headwinds on that.
Yep. No, I agree.
So what's the bottom now?
Well, that was making the assumption that surplus would fund $1 million in '24 for Ag Pres, so the bottom line stayed the same.
Yeah, it stays the
Right.
same.
Right.
Yep. And
And that's putting Ag Pres with a surplus, what, at 2 now instead of the 2.5 it was previously? Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, 2, right.
Okay.
But did you want it to be 2.5?
I just want to clarify where that put it. I wasn't sure
think-
where Commissioner
I think
Vigliotti
one-
was
yeah.
going.
yeah, I think that's,
Which
So we're
one?
taking it down 500,000 because we're moving, yeah, I got you.
No, wait, Commissioner
No, that-
Vigliotti, you want it to be 1.5 million?
Right, yes, I
Of
apologize.
surplus used.
Yes.
Okay,
So
that
it's
would-
back up to the
okay.
2.5.
Okay.
and
I apologize. Roberta, thank you for catching me.
Yeah, no, I think someone, but yeah, just,
It's impossible
Tom,
to
whoever
keep up
called
with
me.
all this.
yeah.
And Commissioner Rothstein, now that we've done all this, I'd be willing to talk about the sheriff, no degree stipend, forget that, and the salary increase, do 1/2 like we did with the rest of the groups.
Any thoughts on that?
Before we go there, do we resolve the issue of the library?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure. And I'm
Okay,
not
so we
sure
don't
if
know
need
where
to
we
hear
are.
From
No,
her.
but we can reach out to her now.
Well, we did.
Well, no, yeah, you're right, we did, but,
I sent her a message.
yeah, okay, so I'm sure she's listening, so we'll see what she said, but,
Well, I shouldn't say that. I was going to say
No.
something stupid. It's, you know.
so, Sheriff, and sometimes we do have to catch ourselves. So your recommendation is to take away the degree stipend and make it to 18.5, or, excuse me, 8.5.
$847.
850,000.
$847,500 to
Yeah, that number.
increases. Because I think, you'd have to tell me, I think the past board, there was an implication that we're trying to get you to where you need to be and we'll try to keep you current.
That is correct.
Well, I'm not
mean-
sure the board said that.
That
Well,
was,
no, okay.
that was correct, yeah. I mean, the sentiment talking with the sheriff was to keep the currency of the pay scales. I mean,
All right, well, if that's the case, then we're back to what I said earlier. You're allowing other jurisdictions to
And I'm disagreeing with that, and that's why I'm
Yeah.
saying make it half. But I'm saying that's why I think we should talk about it. I don't know what you guys think.
and you're saying take out the degree stipend.
Yep. Are we doing that anyplace?
No.
We have a tuition reimbursement program, the county, and they certainly qualify for that as well, the sheriff's staff. And of course, they get, if they go through the training academy and they don't have a
Yes.
degree, they can get their AA degree through the
Yes.
training academy.
So
So
they
other
have-
than that, no.
But they have the tuition
Yes, they're eligible to
benefit
participate.
that the other county employees have.
Yes.
Yes, and just so there's no confusion on this, because this is a new idea, you know, everything Roberta said is true, but what he's actually asking for is compensation for having a degree.
Oh, I
So and that would be every year. You know, so if you get a master's degree, you get X number of dollars
Yep.
every year.
Extra because you have the master's, yeah, not to help you get it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Deb, what does it look like if we put in that half?
This way, everybody's mad at us a little bit. Right?
Yeah. Huh. Well, we're still relatively safe
And we're not,
for the first 3
Commissioner
years.
Guerin said, and we're not done. This is not final.
No, but
Yeah, thank you for
That's
everybody
Tuesday.
watching. We're not done.
Which is a 6.3%.
This is the half of what she asked for.
Yep.
Is that a question from them?
I just wanted to make sure it was clear.
Okay.
in case. Sorry.
I remember a few years back, we adjusted DPW's road maintenance. Was that ever brought back to where it was, or did we leave it as
No, it got reversed eventually.
we did? And everything that was allocated was spent this fiscal year? You know?
Well, I don't know that, but it does get spent. I mean, again, sometimes there's timing,
Yeah.
but there's no chance that we would argue we're putting more money into road maintenance than we need.
So I asked Andrea which, if she had to choose between salaries or the 2 or 3 positions, at this point, she would have to choose the salary since she doesn't believe they can meet minimum wage without it.
Okay.
Which is what you said, right? I thought that's what you said.
No, she
Oh.
told me positions.
Well, I think
Well,
maybe
maybe-
her I believe, I'm guessing, have not spoken to her since the General Assembly finished and moved up
That's
the
correct.
$15, right?
Yep.
So maybe that has
Okay.
changed her
Yep, that's
timing
correct.
then.
Okay. The money that's being spent on the landfill, the second parcel, is that in the enterprise fund, or is that?
It'd be in the enterprise fund, but it's going to be general fund dollars. There isn't money to do that.
Yeah,
So right now, we have about $11 million set aside. We don't know what we're going to need, but we know $11 million isn't going to be the number.
correct. But we have a long ways to go before that's even looked at being developed, correct?
Well, we're in the process of bidding out the planning for this.
Right.
So, yes, the big spending isn't going to start for a while. If you look at doing something here, the idea is we know we're going to spend money. Can we put money aside toward it? If not today, it's going to happen sometime.
And we've decided, I don't know, have we decided the capital project about the parking garage? Have we gone through
No.
that at all with the sheriff's department?
I thought we were still waiting for some additional information on that, if I'm not incorrect.
Well, Public Works came to you with the
Yeah.
master plan for the site and talked some about, how much room there is, stormwater concerns.
I know I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but that's something that's got to be discussed.
Yes, there's several big things still hanging out there.
Yeah.
Blueprint, of course, we've talked about, that's the biggest.
Right.
This garage is another big one. Landfill is another big one. Now, this gets smaller because I think we're closer, but there are still question marks about about EMS. But if we get to the point about talking about fire suppression, that's another big one that we're not planning. I'm hoping that that's not in this plan.
The last thing to me that we talked about, now that we heard back from the library, what do we want to do? We're about 345 short on their salary request, and there was 270 in the three positions. So we could flip the 270 to the salary, they'd still be, whatever that is, 75,000 short of her request, but we're not fulfilling anybody's total, well, we're fulfilling very few of total requests.
But even with that, wouldn't we be going above and beyond for the library than we would for the others?
Yes, we're giving them more, but I don't know that anybody else has the minimum wage issue as badly.
Yeah, they're definitely the one that gets hurt by this.
Well, and it's also maybe a little different in that the other, the circuit courts and the state's attorney, et cetera, and soil conservation are actually on they're getting as it stands at the moment, the 4.5%, plus this half of what they've requested.
Yes.
Whereas the library is only getting this
Whatever they
additional
get.
that they've requested. Does that make sense?
And I've never met an attorney making minimum wage.
Have you ever met an attorney worth making minimum wage?
Ooh,
Just saying.
I didn't say
They're
that.
all worth a lot more.
I'm just saying. Okay. Okay, so we want to go after the library. So you're saying take away the positions of the library and
Put that money into
put that money
raises.
into the raises. Any thoughts on that?
So what's the difference between the two? You said it was roughly, what, 70,000?
No. The 270, we never put in.
Yes, we did.
We
In the-
did?
Yeah, in the original, we did. It's up here, but then we reversed it out.
Oh,
it's much
okay,
more.
okay.
So when you see the negative, it's actually
Well-
just saying, we don't have it in at all.
Gotcha,
No,
okay. I didn't want you to take out something twice.
no, I didn't, yeah.
It's actually down farther. a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
it's here, and then it's coming out here.
So
Reversed it.
the library increase you made was about 345.
That's right, oh, yeah.
And then
That's here.
taking the positions out, you're adding 270 to
The
345
345.
is what he's recommending.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Which is still a little bit less than what they've asked for, but
A little bit less than it
It's-
was, but,
a lot more than,
Well, it's pretty close.
yeah, I
it's a
think.
lot more than the others.
so.
Oh, what is it total?
614, it looks like?
Well, they're asking for a 689, so,
689.
okay.
You know, and going back to a point that Roberta was making, and we've talked about this before, but just a reminder, as things are, the community college and the library are built into your plan with 3% growth assumptions. In recent years, the commissioners have added fairly often to that for the college, not so much for the library. So they're in a little different situation than many, but then with the college, they also have state funding in a different way than the library does, and they've had 2 very good years of state increases.
So the sheriff, the library, the community college didn't have the, wherever we started at 5.5 that everybody else had because they do their own. Right?
Right, they don't have it, but for different reasons. You know, the sheriff is set up the same way as we are, except his number was 4 instead of 5.5. And
Oh,
that
okay.
was because of the 34% increase that
Okay,
preceded
gotcha.
that. Then the college and library, all we're doing is looking, your entire budget, here's a 3% assumed increase.
They do, they spread it out how they want.
Yeah, and with both, you know, they're not going to take a 3% increase and give 5.5% salary increases. They
yes,
just
yes.
can't get there.
So the community college, we did cut him 0.5%.
We did, or a half. Yeah,
Yes.
we did, yep.
You reduced the amount that they were requested.
Yes, yes, yes,
By
yes.
50%.
You know, and I say that, it might seem like nitpicking, but it's not unusual out there for people to say, yeah, you cut my budget, when actually what you're doing is cutting what they requested for their
The
budget.
extra,
Right.
yes.
So the project for the parking garage and parking area, excuse me, for the complex, part of it's a study, right? And then allocating money to building the parking garage? Is that?
Well, that is a path. You know, right now, we have not planned to build a garage. You've heard the reasons why they think we should. I think the next big decision after we get the study will be how large a garage do we want, and what are we trying to accommodate?
Right.
And there could be different answers to that.
But the first step is allocating the funds to do the study.
Yes.
With the understanding that a garage is to be built.
And I would say ideally, we would put something in the capital budget for this, even though we don't know what the end is going to be. If there's going to be something, then I'd rather have 20 million sitting there,
Okay.
even if it turned out to be 19 or turned out to be 39, at least you're not starting from zero.
And that project has no other land available to do more regular parking. If the study said there's not enough parking, a garage is one of the very few options.
Yeah, there's also the possibility that we could talk with Westminster about their requirements. So as I understand it, this is all being driven by square foot calculations. You know, Sheriff Headquarters, the biggest part of his employees don't operate out of that building. When we build a detention center, clearly, office space, square foot requirements, wouldn't seem to be applicable.
Yeah.
The only one that maybe makes sense would be the state's attorney. Those people are, I mean, that's where they work.
Okay.
And, we can consider parking, what other parking is around and how we're making
Right.
use of it. And I'm not saying that there's some easy solution that just makes this go away, but it could impact how large a garage we decide to build.
Has there been a recommendation on when the study is to be done? Is it FY '24, '25?
Well, that's up to you.
Right, okay.
Now, remember, the sheriff was arguing to do it now, and if your intent is to move ahead with an assumption we're going to build a garage, then it might make sense. It's not a major expenditure. We can handle it out of '23.
Right,
And that, picks us up a few months.
yeah. Okay,
I like that.
yeah,
And I think we need to do it, but I agree with you, if we're gonna do it, I think we could do the study and say, we know we need more parking, so we need to put money in to the capital budget for something.
I agree.
Ted, does something like that fall under the purview of a public safety impact fee? So I would make the argument that that ultimately sustains the public safety infrastructure that we have to provide the same level of services that we're providing now, just in a different place.
First, going back to, remember, Roberta checked, we don't have the authority, so we would have to get the authority first.
So going
Then,
into next
Second,
year.
I'm not saying the argument can't be made, I think it's a tough argument. I know the logic holds together for you, but it's kind of like, with schools, I'll get people arguing with me that we should be fixing roofs with impact fees, and I tell them, you just can't do it. And they will explain to me why it makes sense, and my point isn't, it doesn't make sense, it's just not that, it doesn't work that way. So what you're saying isn't quite there, but it's another one I think we need to think that through very carefully and make sure that we truly felt comfortable that if it ended up in court, that we believe we could defend that.
Are you willing to sit down with me to help me try to make an argument for that?
Well, of course, I'm willing to talk through whatever you want, but my starting point is, I think it's a stretch.
Well, because if I can convince you, Ted, then I think we can hold up in a court of law.
But I guess I'd wonder, is your intention, if you do that kind of a fee, do you want it, it's gonna be ongoing, so do you really want it tied to a building, or do you want it?
I believe we hit all the nonprofits. Are there any other nonprofits to be discussed that we haven't talked about? I know you're talking to the Historical Society.
Yep.
No, I think
They're gonna be meeting
you
this
guys are going out
week.
there tomorrow.
Thursday.
Something. Thursday.
Yep.
Historical Society.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Any other capital projects? No addition to airport, correct, that we need to discuss right now?
Nothing changing from the existing plan.
Right.
Although, that's not to say that it won't change.
Right.
This is a expensive, long, and complicated project. And we're dependent on federal money and the timing of that federal money. So it's one we have to watch very carefully. And, you've been involved in some of the things, and right from the beginning, just the land acquisition pieces of this is a very hard start to, when you have money you're spending today against money you plan to receive over many years.
Yeah. Any other capital projects?
No, not off the top of my head.
The funding that we provide to the jurisdictions, has any of that been adjusted or needs to be adjusted for conversation or no?
Well, there's
The MOUs? and-
it's done with a formula
Right,
that has been in place since before me.
okay,
So adjusting that would mean either ignoring the existing formula
Right.
or redoing it.
right.
I think those would both be difficult things to do. You'd have to have 8 jurisdictions all agree on doing it the same way. And the way the formula works, in most years, there are kind of winners and losers among the town. Now, this year, because of inflation, everybody is seeing an increase, but that's unusual. And towns tend to like the formula in years where they're on the good side. They don't like the formula on the years where they're not. But it's been a while since we did this, but we actually did a study to look at how we were funding the municipalities relative to how other counties were under the state law. Remember, we are not covered under the state law. Our revenue sharing program was in place before the law, and we were grandfathered. And the study at that time, at least, found that we were doing better than what we would be forced to do. And I think it's worked pretty well here. It's not unusual to hear some pretty ugly fights sometimes between towns and counties, in other parts of the state over
Yeah.
this kind of money.
And I think it's also important, too, to remember that municipalities that are able to utilize this funding for certain things means that we don't have to cover them in their stead.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
I've always believed that was a bit overstated, though, because, I'm not sure what services the towns are providing that stops the county from providing. Now, of course, the biggest...
Not that it stops the county, but that we don't have to, I guess is a better way. If I wasn't clear, I apologize.
Yeah, well, I guess I just mean in terms of saving us any funding. Of course, the big expenditure is schools, and the towns don't provide schools, but they all use the schools. Probably the best example of where there is a change is where you have municipal police. Arguably, if Westminster didn't have police, we would have to staff higher. So that one, I will accept there's an offset. Sometimes people talk about parks, but I don't think, municipal parks keep people from using the county parks. We're still serving them. Towns have roads. They take care of their own roads. But they still use all the county roads. You can't go anywhere without driving on a county road. So, I understand the thinking, but sometimes I think the arguments get a little bit too strong about, how much it saves the county.
I mean, coming from the municipal standpoint, especially with the law enforcement side of things, it really is, for a municipality, from my perspective anyways, it was better to have a local, like a very local law enforcement agency that could work in conjunction with the sheriff's department through the cross-jurisdictional deputization agreement, but also, being able to provide an immediate level of assistance to citizens in the municipality, right? Again, that means that the sheriff doesn't have to allocate as many, or, position as many deputies in the area. That means he can focus on other areas, which means that you're not hiring additional deputies, which means that in the long run, I think the county and the towns both benefit from that.
Yep, on law enforcement, I absolutely agree.
Well, gentlemen, I think maybe we've gone as far as we can today. I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Certainly feels like it.
The community college, I would like to ask the question of the community college. I know what we're recommending as far as salary increase, but we also provide funds to community college for other services that they provide. And for
In,
them. What's that?
Entrepreneurship and adult basic education?
Right, and for them to prioritize one over the other. Because I know what they're requesting. They're not getting everything that they requested. Does this support their needs, or do they want to reshift their priorities?
They didn't request anything for adult basic education,
What's that?
did they?
They just requested a salary increase. So,
In adult basic education?
not in addition. That's already in the recommended budget. Adult education and entrepreneurship.
Okay, so what is it that you want them to prioritize?
Right now, we're giving them 50% of their request for salary increase. If they want to look at that and compare it to the other two programs that we are funding, would they want one over the other?
Okay, to actually lose funding in one of those areas?
And add to the salary increases, because that salary increase may have more value to them than another program. The community colleges have a real tough time with salaries and with enrollment, so.
Point out on adult basic education, there's state money in the mix there too. So
Right.
a reduction in county funding is also a reduction in state funding.
Right,
The entrepreneurship program is something that you fund entirely.
completely discretionary, right.
So given where it looks like this conversation is going now, offer a few thoughts on where it looks to me like we are and what we might be able to do on Thursday. I think in theory, you could vote right now and say, all right, we have a proposed budget. I'm not suggesting that you do that, but you have something we could move ahead with. Yes, we have an unbalanced plan. I said from the beginning, I don't believe we're going to balance that plan this year. It seems like we come back on Thursday, you could give some more thought to all the pieces of what we did here, and maybe we come back and there's some minor changes that we want to make, something that didn't get addressed or something you want to change a little bit here. But we're probably in position to say, okay, we're ready to move on. This is what we're going to offer the public. And then we start that part of the process.
So Thursday, we have open session at 09. And then I take it we have work session at 1 PM? Or is it 11:30?
If you have time in the late morning, then,
Okay.
and then again at 1.
So the intent is to go, if available, right into work session upon conclusion of the open session. And then we go from there.
Is there anything that any of you is seeing as a major area of discussion that's still hanging out there?
FY '29.
Were you saying you wanted to add the 123 back to the Carroll County, to the community college?
Now I want the community college to tell me if that's what they
Oh,
want.
you want them, you want their opinion? Okay, gotcha. And
Yeah.
then the schools, which I don't know what we do with that anyway, we kind of asked them to look at the next 5 years and do their best guess.
Right.
But we don't have the money for it anyway. I don't know what, you
I
know,
No, but I think you're right. I think,
it'd be nice to hear from them.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm not sure where they are on that, but I can check.
yeah. And then I'm scheduled to attend tomorrow, the Board of Education meeting. Yay. What else? Anything else you would think of?
Oh, the only thing I do want to point out is 6 hours ago when we first started, I made a comment, and I'm going to stand by that comment, which is I would like all of us, regardless of where we end up on Thursday, to reconvene on Tuesday because it is a proposed date, and I think given that 4 of us are new, I'd like to have an additional day or even the weekend if maybe something comes up in somebody's mind to have that opportunity, because I'd rather us do it and take an extra day, which is why we were all elected to these positions, versus us going, oh, wait, we forgot this, and it's 3 days after the fact.
I have no problem meeting again.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
And then, when all is said and done, we move forward, it goes to public hearing, comes back to us, it's still not an approved budget. We then take the comments from public hearing, we can make the appropriate adjustments, and then we provide the final budget. So, nothing is done, it's just getting more in stone as we move forward, but we're still quite a ways off.
Yep.
So, okay, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.